One function to rule them all, one function to find them, one function to bring them all and in the darkness bind them. While in Power BI, that function is calculate. From this lecture, we're going to kickstart our journey to learn all about the calculate function in DAX. First, let's talk about the role of calculate in DAX. There are three important things about the calculate function that you need to know about. First, it can combine an aggregation function with the calculation context. And then it's going to perform that aggregation and then return a single value. Usually that will be a number, all right? And in the advanced section about this calculate function, you will see that when it works with a calculation context, it can not only shrink it by applying filters, but there are some context modifiers that can actually expand the calculation context. So you can see calculate is very powerful by shrinking and expanding the calculation context. Let's take a look at its syntax. The syntax of calculate is rather simple. First, you have these context filters. You can add one or multiple context filters, but these are all optional, so you don't have to add any context filters. If you leave everything out, that would be using the default context. And also, you can specify the calculation. You have to specify this parameter to the calculate function because this shows calculate how to aggregate your values. So you have to have this one, but the context filters are optional. And remember, in the end, the calculate function always returns one value, a scalar. So let's take a look at the calculate function in practice. In this lecture, we'll be using the DAX Essential Workbook, so make sure you have grabbed this workbook. In this workbook, you can find a table called Simple. Under this simple table, we have the sales amount column. So let's try to create a measure that reports the total sales of the sales amount column. Do you still remember how to create a measure? Yes, you right-click on the table name, you click on New Measure, and you name it total sales. That equals to the sum of the simple tables, sales amount column, right? And you finish this function. Apply your change. Once the measure is created, drag and drop it on the canvas. Turn this into a table. And you can see it's reporting $10.2. That is the correct value. Now, how do you use the calculate function? Let's create another measure. Click on New Measure again. This time, we're going to call it total sales with calculate. All right, and in this function, we're going to call the calculate function, and then we need to specify the aggregation expression. So here, we're going to call it sum of the simple table, sales amount column. There we go. And we just close this calculate function because we're not adding any additional filters to this calculation. And that's it. Apply the change. Drag and drop the new measure to the table. And you can see we have the same result, $10.2 from the total sales with calculate. You might be wondering what is the difference between this total sales measure, which does not use the calculate, versus this measure using the calculate. But in the core of this calculate, the aggregate function is exactly the same as this total sales function. The fact is, there's no difference. Actually, behind the scene of this measure, because we're not writing calculate, so implicitly, Power BI would wrap your expression in another calculate, and then use that changed formula to do the calculation. How about you just use these total sales measures instead of repeating the formula over here? So let's try to delete this part and replace this with just the total sales measure. Okay, you can see now within the calculate function, we have total sales measure as the first parameter. Still, we're not using any filters. So let's give it a try. Click on enter. It's still showing $10.2, so that works. This is not a surprise because the total sales measure contains an aggregation which totally satisfies the requirement from this calculate function. Okay, so now you know you can write the expression here, or you can just refer to another measure in the calculate function. All right, so that's our first look at the calculate function. In the following lectures, we're going to learn how to use the context filters to make powerful calculations using the calculate function. All right, stay tuned, and I will see you guys in the next lecture.